Grover lost his memory after the car accident. Lying in the hospital bed, he stared at me blankly. I'm sorry, I don't remember you. Feeling a bit sad, but still caring for Grover attentively, helping him regain his memory. Then downstairs, I saw him passionately kissing his ex-girlfriend. I overheard him sarcastically saying, "I don't love her, I lied to her about losing my memory, and she actually believed it." When I caught him in the act, Grover remained unapologetic. "I really don't remember you." I smiled faintly and took the 2 movie tickets I bought from his hand. "It's okay, my boyfriend isn't you anyway." Chapter 1. Grover had a car accident. His mother called me, asking me to come to the hospital. I cancelled the client meeting I had, quickly hailed a cab, and rushed to the hospital. As soon as I entered, I saw Grover in a patient gown, sitting there in a daze. The sunlight was shining on his profile. He looked like the teenage boy I had always admired. As he heard some noise, he turned towards us, spun around twice, and his gaze fell on me. I instinctively ran over to check on him. Grover looked bewildered. He seemed somewhat surprised and puzzled as he gazed at me. "Who are you?" My heart skipped a beat. Looking at Grover's expression, it didn't seem like he was faking it. Grover's mother explained from the side. "The doctor said he might have amnesia." I felt sad for a moment, then quickly gathered myself. "It's okay, I will help you regain your memory slowly." I went to get him some water. When I returned, I noticed another person next to Grover. The girl was dressed as a nurse but had a playful vibe, clearly not a nurse from this hospital. She leaned in close to Grover, very intimately. From my vantage point, they seemed to be getting very close. Grover didn't flinch. "Grover, do you remember me?" As soon as that girl spoke, I froze in place. Grover's ex-girlfriend. Flora. I wasn't curious about why she was here, but her presence made me very uncomfortable. I was about to take a step inside. Suddenly, Grover chuckled lightly. He said, "Silly, of course I remember you." Chapter 2. Grover really had amnesia. He no longer remembered who I was. But he remembered his ex-girlfriend Flora. She had her hair tied up in a pair of ponytails, looking carefree and just like she did back in college. Grover liked Flora, a fact known to everyone during their university days. Right now, Grover was staring intently at the girl in front of him, his eyes filled with affection. Flora was sitting on his lap. Her arms wrapped around Grover's neck. She chuckled softly. "Do you remember when I kissed you like this for the first time?" Grover nodded. And then he couldn't help but lean in closer. My temples pulsed with frustration. Unable to hold back any longer, I walked in. "Grover." As soon as my voice rang out, Flora and Grover quickly separated. Grover looked up at me. The smile on his face vanished. He looked at me in confusion. "Why is it you? Who are you?" "Rebecca, your girlfriend," I said naturally, glancing at Flora. The look in her eyes towards me flashed with a hint of jealousy and hostility. But she quickly regained her composure. Her smile was as bright as ever. "Rebecca, I heard Grover had an accident and thought he hadn't eaten lunch, so I made a little something myself. It's not as good as yours, Rebecca, but Grover, please don't mind." Flora shook the thermos in her hand, raising an eyebrow with a smile. I was about to say it wasn't necessary. Grover's voice cut in. "I don't mind." Flora beamed a bright smile. She immediately sat down next to Grover. They were very close, their clothes touching each other. Grover didn't hide either. His gaze quietly followed her, watching her every move. Flora opened the thermos, feeding Grover with her own hands. "Open up." "Ah." Grover chuckled softly. He obediently opened his mouth and took a bite. Flora teasingly smiled at me. "Rebecca, could you please go get a glass of water for Grover?" Chapter 3. At this moment, Flora acted just like Grover's girlfriend. I didn't move. The scene fell silent, and Grover's gaze shifted towards me. Seeing me not moving, he furrowed his brows slightly. I smiled and took the thermos from her hands. Thank you for bringing food for my boyfriend, but when it comes to feeding him, I can handle it. I stood in front of her, quietly waiting for her to make way for me. Flora hesitated for a moment, then smirked. She explained very considerately. I was just too worried about Grover earlier and lost my boundaries. I didn't mean anything else. Rebecca, don't misunderstand. I smiled back at her. I won't misunderstand. My boyfriend, I trust him. Before leaving, Flora shook her head and left me with a meaningful smile. Sitting next to Grover, I handed him the thermos and chopsticks. He didn't take them. Only when Flora's figure had completely disappeared down the hospital corridor did Grover slowly avert his gaze. The smile on his lips faded and he returned to his usual indifferent demeanor. I don't feel like eating. I didn't insist either. Turning around, I poured all the food from the thermos into the trash can. Grover looked surprised. You. I raised my head. You said you didn't want to eat, right? I used the chopsticks to clean out the food from the thermos. I bet the takeout Flora ordered isn't appetizing either. I'll go downstairs and get you something nutritious. Chapter 4. Grover sheepishly averted his gaze. His expression carried a chill. No need. All right, then I won't buy it. Since he said he didn't need it, he must not be hungry yet. I recounted memories between Grover and me. How he braved the rain to buy my favorite cream puffs just to win me over. How he waited a whole day and night to get tickets to the concert I liked. He even mentioned that we would get married 2 years after graduation. Grover listened to all this with a skeptical look. Why does it sound like? These things don't seem like something I would do. I smiled at him. Indeed, these weren't things he did. They were all me. But I just wanted to see if he would remember. The doctor said he would be discharged soon. While waiting for the discharge process, I busied myself with replying to clients' messages. Grover's gaze fell on me several times. Seeming like he wanted to say something but hesitated. Chapter 5. I put down my phone and turned around. I'm your girlfriend, if you have something to say, just say it. Grover looked up at me. If I keep not remembering you, what will you do? I stared at him for a while. Then I'll help you remember me. After being discharged, Grover's leg was still not agile and he couldn't do many things. So, I became the most caring girlfriend. Buying his favorite buns for breakfast. Taking care of him after work in the evenings. I even helped him hand wash his socks. Ajo, we're out of laundry detergent. No response. I turned to look into the living room. Grover sat on the couch, looking at his phone. He didn't hear me, completely engrossed in his phone screen, occasionally smiling. I leaned in to see who Grover might be chatting with. A screen full of text. Before I could see who he was chatting with, Grover heard my footsteps and quickly hid his phone. Looking alert, he said. You scared me. Seeing him acting so sneaky, looking guilty, made me feel uncomfortable. I playfully teased. What are you hiding? If I didn't know, I'd think you had someone else outside. Grover's expression turned slightly unnatural. His phone was upside down on the couch. Looking up at me, his expression still seemed confused and indifferent. Sorry, I still can't remember you. As he said this, he glanced at the socks in my hands, still with soap suds. Do you feel unjust treating me this way? I blinked. Something about that statement didn't sit right with me. But I still smiled and said, no, not at all, you are my boyfriend after all. Chapter 6. For several days in a row, I followed the same routine. Taking care of Grover, having dinner together, then heading home. On this particular day, I had to work overtime due to urgent matters with a difficult client that I couldn't avoid. I had to message Grover. I have to work late tonight, can't come to your place. Soon enough, Grover replied with a simple okay. Just as I finished dinner and was about to head back to work, I received a message from the client canceling our appointment. The client had something come up and couldn't make it. I thought that by now, Grover and Auntie probably hadn't had dinner, so I bought some takeout to bring back. Just as I was about to go upstairs, my gaze inadvertently fell on a familiar couple. Grover's leg seemed perfectly fine. He stood steadily. Not only that, he was hugging the teary-eyed Flora and comforting her softly. Baby, you know, you're my favorite person. As long as you say the word, I'll go through hell and high water for you. Except for you, no one else has that privilege. Flora dramatically punched his chest with her tiny fists. Then why haven't you broken up with Rebecca? As Flora spoke, tears threatened to fall again. Seeing Grover furrow his brows in concern, Grover comforted her. She's such a simp, spending money and effort like a babysitter. That face cream you used the other day? She bought it for me. Look, she just gave me 2 brand new movie tickets. I was waiting to watch with you. Flora glanced at the movie tickets. The tears stopped falling. She stubbornly wrapped her arms around Grover's neck and kissed him fiercely. I don't care, even if we break up, you're still mine. You're not allowed to fall in love with her. Grover lightly chuckled and rubbed her forehead. His tone carried a hint of mockery. With that idiot, I could make her believe she has amnesia. How could I possibly fall in love with her? Chapter 7. Hearing this, Flora laughed joyfully. I, on the other hand, stood frozen in place, my fists clenched. As their love reached its peak, they embraced each other and passionately kissed. I couldn't bear to watch any longer. I walked directly towards them, staring with wide eyes, silently observing. You two seem to be in a good mood. How about I take a photo for you? Flora reacted first, her eyes meeting mine, and she let out a sharp "ah" of surprise. Grover then turned to see me. His expression changed rapidly, eventually turning ashen. Rebecca, aren't you supposed to be working overtime? How did you end up here? Grover seemed to realize something, his expression shifting. Rebecca, you already knew, were you intentionally following me? His character was questionable, but his imagination was quite good. I couldn't help but smile. Grover, so now you remember everything, huh? Grover sneered. Pointing at Flora, he spoke confidently. Sorry, I still don't remember you, I can't love you. But my intuition tells me, she's the girl I like. I nodded in surprise. Silence lingered for a while. Then I burst into laughter. Well, congratulations to you then. Without hesitation, I snatched the 2 movie tickets I had bought earlier from Grover. It's okay, I think I've regained my memory. Suddenly remembered. My boyfriend isn't you. Chapter 8. I turned to leave. Flora looked displeased. Why does she get to take our movie tickets? Grover whispered. Those tickets were bought by her. Flora was not happy. She stomped her foot in anger. I don't care, you get them back for me. Grover really did listen to her. Sure enough, he took 3 or 4 steps towards me, blocking my way. And his legs were really muscular. It made me doubt whether his amnesia, leg injury, and even the car accident were all fake. Rebecca, about the movie tickets. I sneered, he really had the nerve to ask me for them. I looked down at the takeout dinner in my hands, along with the hot and sour soup. I turned around and poured it over his face in one go. Grover, since you have no shame, let me help you wash your face properly. Flora rushed over, pointing at me and scolding. Why are you so rude? I impatiently picked up another container of hot and sour soup and poured it over her face too. No need to fight, both of you have a share, you dead green tea. Knowing Grover was this kind of person, doing such things. Even if it was to feed a dog, I wouldn't give it to him. Amidst the 2 of them shouting and yelling, I clapped my hands, then walked away confidently. Chapter 9. I ran into Grover and Flora again half a month later. I was waiting for a customer at the entrance of a bubble tea shop. Flora was insisting that Grover buy bubble tea. They seemed to have just had an argument, and Grover didn't look too good. As soon as he turned around, he saw me. Flora immediately followed behind Grover, pitifully tugging at his sleeve. Grover, you misunderstood just now. I was just admiring that handsome man, it doesn't mean I don't love you. Besides, when I asked for someone's WeChat, they rejected me. I know you love me, you care about me, but can you not be angry, okay? As Flora spoke, she glanced sneakily at me. Grover also followed her gaze. He paused, then broke into a smile. Holding a cup of bubble tea, he handed it to Flora, then chuckled and walked towards me. Regretting it now? He taunted me from above. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Seeing me silent, Grover chuckled mockingly. See, Flora? That's exactly the kind of simp I was telling you about. Even if you take the initiative to break up with me, you still follow me all the way, chasing me here. If you're unclear with other men, then I don't want you. Go back to being a spare tire. I couldn't help but retch. The retching sound was quite loud, interrupting Grover's speech. Grover looked at me with a flickering gaze. What's wrong with you? He pretended to care. I straightened up and smiled. Sorry, I heard a dog barking just now and felt a bit nauseous, couldn't hold it in. Grover's face turned pale then dark. Rebecca, you won't regret this. I sneered. Of course, I wouldn't regret it. Grover tried to leave with Flora, but she stopped him. Wait a minute. Flora smirked. The last time she poured hot and sour soup on us isn't over yet. Saying this, she twisted the lid of her bubble tea and walked towards me. Chapter 10. Understanding her intention, I immediately dodged. But I still didn't completely avoid it. She raised her hand and splashed the bubble tea at me, wetting my skirt. A hot and wet sensation rolled over my back. Oh no. This skirt I was wearing was specifically for meeting clients, the material couldn't touch water. Once wet, it would quickly turn transparent. Flora covered her mouth and chuckled when she saw this. Grover, look, now it's her turn to make a fool of herself in public. As she said this, a large suit jacket was draped over my shoulders. Then my arm was gently pulled, and I was pulled into the man's embrace. It was the customer I was waiting for, Martin. He shielded me, his brows furrowed and eyes coldly looking up. Flora's smile froze in her throat as she looked at Martin in astonishment. You. Grover became alert. Frowning, he asked Flora. Is he the man you wanted to add on WeChat? Doesn't seem like a good guy at all. Grover's tone was sour and awkward. He glanced at me nonchalantly and added another sentence. Still hanging out with Rebecca, maybe they have some unspeakable relationship. Martin frowned coldly at him. I advise you to watch your mouth. Then he looked at Flora. Damaging someone else's things requires compensation. This skirt was a gift from me to her, quite valuable. You decide whether to settle privately or go through the proper channels. Flora glanced at me and then at him, her eyes unreadable. After what seemed like a long moment, she finally accepted the fact that we both knew each other. She tightly bit her lip, trying to make a pitiful and innocent expression. What do you mean by going through the proper channels? Calling the police. Martin stated bluntly. Chapter 11. Flora tried to sweet-talk her way out of compensation. Brother, I was wrong, I didn't know her skirt was so expensive. Furthermore, I didn't start it, it was this wicked woman who first poured hot and sour soup on me last time. Martin listened and looked at me. I nodded and smiled. So what? Martin lightly brushed off the dust on his sleeve, his tone light. Whatever she wants to do, she must have her reasons. You must compensate for this skirt. Martin's words made me secretly happy. He really didn't fall for the scheming woman routine. Seeing that no matter what she said, Martin wouldn't budge, Flora actually changed her attitude and turned to me for help. Sister Rebecca, how about this? We are old classmates after all. I didn't know your skirt was so expensive. Just now, I acted impulsively. Besides, last time you poured hot and sour soup on me, can't we consider that even? I couldn't help but laugh. Who said we're even? You stole my boyfriend, you like to cheat. How could I possibly consider us even? Moreover, it's only right to compensate for damaging someone's property. It's not about calling someone brother or sister, pretending to be pitiful, and getting away with it. I glanced at Grover with a sly smile. Not everyone falls for your scheming woman act. Flora's face turned pale. Just before she was about to call the police, Flora reluctantly agreed to compensate. Flora didn't have that much money. She looked at Grover. Grover, can you help me with the compensation? I don't have that much money. Grover's expression turned unpleasant. You don't have it, and I don't have that much money either. Chapter 12. I looked at them lightly, with a faint smile on my face. Of course, Grover didn't have that much money. Since graduating, he relied on his good looks and having a girlfriend as caring as me to think that he could live well without working. A lot of things in his house were bought by me. Now that we've broken up, I've stopped the material supplies, so it's only natural that he's struggling. Grover and Flora looked at each other. The two of them whispered to each other for a long time, but they didn't come to any conclusion. Martin chuckled and looked at me. You keep rejecting me, is it all for this man? I chuckled self-deprecatingly. I was blind before, my apologies. I glanced at my watch, realizing it was almost time. Have you figured out how to compensate? Flora hid behind Grover. He will compensate. Grover hesitated and transferred his savings. His expression was grim. Flora, this was all the money I saved for our future together. Now it's gone. Flora was impatient. Just save more, didn't expect you to be such a miser, counting every penny. Martin put his arm around me and we left. Grover's words just now stirred up waves in my heart. We had been together for 2 years. He had never mentioned marrying me. But he had been saving for Flora's dowry early on. I couldn't help but lightly laugh, mocking myself for the blindness of these past 2 years. It really is hard to put into words. Chapter 13. Martin had been pursuing me for a long time. He was originally my client at work, but he claimed to have fallen for me at first sight. He had been pursuing me persistently, but I had not agreed. Ever since the incident at the bubble tea shop, where he helped me out of a tight spot. He had been unwaveringly pursuing me. Rebecca, although I fully trust your work abilities, I do have serious doubts about your judgment. So, there must be a reason why you haven't accepted me despite me pursuing you for so long. Every time we went out for a meal, Martin would considerately pull out a chair for me. Then, he would meticulously prepare napkins for me. His thoughtfulness and attention to detail were things I had never experienced before. My heart warmed up to him. I suggested that we could try dating. What's bothering you? I stood on the balcony, staring blankly at my phone. Martin embraced me from behind. There's a classmate gathering this weekend that I don't want to attend. But a senior from our school insists that I have to go. Martin sensed that I didn't want to encounter Grover and Flora. We had known each other from university to graduation. Martin ruffled my hair. Go ahead, you don't have to be afraid of anything. I'll come pick you up when it's over. There was something shimmering in Martin's eyes. I stared, transfixed. The next moment, with a hint of a smile, Martin gently kissed me. The classmate gathering was held in a hotel private room. When I arrived, the room was filled with people. Flora was wearing a white dress, sitting at the center chatting with classmates. You guys don't know, but Rebecca has hooked a big fish now. Martin, the general manager of Lucky Star Group, do you guys know? She. As I walked in, the room fell silent. Chapter 14. Only Flora's unfinished words lingered in the air. Senior Owen came over to greet me. Rebecca is here. Senior. I politely smiled and sat down with the senior. Coincidentally, I ended up sitting next to Flora. Flora sneered sarcastically. "Oh, isn't this our famous alumna, Rebecca? It's all her prowess, but who knows if it's earned through hard work or through other means." She rolled her eyes lightly. People around chuckled, covering their mouths. I sat quietly in my seat, not saying a word. A female voice close to Flora chimed in with a weird tone. "Well, it's true what they say, you never truly know someone's heart." Back then, Grover was the school's popular guy, and he only had eyes for Flora, but in the end, that so-called perfect couple had a fight. And then, someone took advantage of the situation, stole Flora's boyfriend. Gasps could be heard all around. Some junior students covered their mouths, whispering to their friends. Is it even appropriate to talk about this? Instinctively, I glanced over at Grover sitting in the corner. He lit a cigarette, remained silent, just watching our side quietly. I couldn't help but furrow my brows. I never liked the smell of smoke. In the 2 years we were together, I had forced Grover to quit smoking. He never smoked in front of me, but now, he was back to being the same Grover he was with Flora. I lowered my eyes and smiled lightly. Grover's silence was an admission. In front of so many old classmates, he was allowing Flora to slander me in this manner. He was the one who cheated, and Flora was the shameless one. Yet, here they were, shamelessly distorting the truth in front of our old classmates. The murmurs around us were incessant. I turned to Owen, asking loudly. "Senior, you study law, what kind of punishment is there for baseless accusations and slander?" Chapter 15. Owen's gaze shifted between me and Flora, chuckled awkwardly twice, then came over to explain. "Junior, don't mind it, we all know you're not like that. Besides, Flora probably didn't mean any harm." I looked at him quietly. I just felt like this person in front of me was as much a stranger as ever. Although he was a senior from the same school, we hadn't interacted much before, and there were rumors that Owen also liked Flora. Perhaps a girl like Flora, with her looks, naturally attracted others. But that didn't mean I had to endure baseless accusations. I smiled lightly. "Senior, do you know what kind of person Flora really is?" My voice wasn't loud, but everyone present could hear. I stood up. "I didn't steal anyone's boyfriend. After Grover and Flora broke up, he pursued me. We were together for 2 years. After Flora shamelessly became a third party, she spent my money, used things I bought, even the face cream she used was a gift I gave to my ex-boyfriend, Grover. As for those accusations about me being the gold digger, it's just because Flora couldn't seduce my boyfriend, so she got angry and resorted to defaming me. In the classmates' minds, I was originally a quiet and reserved person. When these words came out, they all looked at me in surprise. Their gazes towards Flora also changed. Chapter 16. Flora stood up as well. "What are you talking about? The eyes of our classmates are sharp, everyone can see whether someone tried to steal my boyfriend." Flora's gaze swept back and forth over me, sneering. "Moreover, just relying on a girl like you, how could you possibly climb to the position of vice president in a big company without relying on a man?" I chuckled in disbelief. Shaking my head, I said, "Of course, someone like you couldn't, but I can. It seems like today's class reunion isn't worth much. Since any kind of dog can be let in, I will excuse myself." I turned and left. Owen tried to get up to stop me. "Rebecca, don't go." I pushed the door open and left. After stepping outside, I realized it was raining. I didn't have an umbrella, so I called Martin. Soon, I heard footsteps behind me. Flora and a few classmates followed me outside. You may not believe what I say, but at least believe your own eyes, right? She didn't bring an umbrella, someone will definitely come to pick her up later, just watch and see. I suddenly regretted why I came here today. Just then, Grover pushed past them, holding an umbrella as he walked towards me. "Take this." I looked at Grover in astonishment, as if he was a strange and unfamiliar person to me. He still held the umbrella up. Flora, witnessing this scene, was about to explode with anger. Grover. What are you doing? That's my umbrella. Chapter 17. Grover frowned, looking at Flora with a gaze that was no longer as affectionate as before, but rather tinged with a hint of disdain and disgust. Flora rushed over, trying to snatch it. Grover dodged, causing Flora to lose her balance and almost fall over. That's my umbrella too. Flora suddenly felt a bit overwhelmed, her eyes turning red. Grover, tell me the truth, have you really fallen in love with Rebecca? Grover fell silent. Then he stared into Flora's eyes. Yes, I regret being with you. Flora stood frozen in place. Ignoring her, Grover turned towards me and handed me the umbrella. Rebecca, I'm sorry. I was too foolish before, blinded by Flora's schemes, and couldn't see your goodness. Can you give me another chance? Grover's eyes showed hope. He approached me cautiously. But I frowned. The unpleasant smell of smoke, carried by the night wind, spread from Grover to me. I covered my nose and mouth lightly, smiling and shaking my head. I'm sorry, I already have a boyfriend. After all, I can't play games and be indecisive like that. A black car stopped at the hotel entrance. It honked twice gently. I turned to look. Martin rolled down the car window and waved at me. Then he held an umbrella, got out of the car. Thank you for bringing my girlfriend. Martin was humble and polite, expressing gratitude to the old classmates who came out to see the commotion. Let's go. Martin held my hand, and as we were about to leave, someone called us from behind. Wow, is this a Rolls-Royce? I've never seen a living person drive such a luxury car. Rebecca, is your boyfriend really that rich? The exclamation of the old classmates revived Flora. She sneered at me with narrowed eyes, full of jealousy and malice. I told you earlier, if she didn't latch onto a rich man, how could she possibly find such a wealthy boyfriend? After all, we are all old classmates, we know each other inside out. Rebecca, what kind of person you are, we all know very well. Flora's malicious taunts made everyone present furrow their brows. Grover's face turned cold. Shut up. What do you mean, your umbrella? This is the one I gave you. Martin took a steady look at Flora. Then he spoke. If I remember correctly, you're the girl who dirted my girlfriend's clothes last time, right? You've saved up for years, but you couldn't even afford to compensate for my girlfriend's dress. With your caliber and vision, you'll naturally find a man who matches you. Flora's face turned pale with anger. What did you say? I watched Martin with interest. I never expected him to be so refined. He could even speak cutting words. Like a strategist in a verbal battle, Martin scanned my old classmates. However, I owe a lot to Rebecca for where I am today. If it wasn't for her planning, I wouldn't be able to drive a Rolls-Royce. After speaking, Martin smiled and led me away. I glanced back. Flora's face twisted with anger. Grover stood there, looking dark and brooding. I felt triumphant inside. Chapter 19. As time went by, I realized that Martin and I were truly compatible. We shared similar interests, endless topics to discuss. Especially in our work field, we were not only friends but also partners, understanding each other without words. Every time Martin challenged me at work, he couldn't resist giving me a back rub when we got home. Several times, Martin said my presentation slides needed improvement. Once home, I knelt in front of the keyboard several times. After kneeling at the keyboard, he would open his phone and help me edit the slides. I cracked sunflower seeds, enjoying every moment. As for Grover and Flora, they seemed to be drifting further away from me. The memories of their past deeds were slowly fading from my mind. Until one day. I heard Flora got into some trouble and Grover came to me for help. I didn't answer the phone, blocked all contact. Grover waited for me downstairs at my office. He looked sorrowful, even attempted to kneel down, drawing attention from my colleagues. Concerned he might cause trouble, I arranged to meet him at a cafe downstairs from the office. Grover appeared worn out. He had lost weight. Anxiously, he began. Rebecca, I know I've wronged you. But I really need your help now. I took a sip of coffee, listening without much expression. He is the first ex-boyfriend I've ever met. After causing such an unpleasant scene, he had the nerve to come to his ex-girlfriend for help regarding his ex-girlfriend. Flora felt unwanted by me, so she took sleeping pills. I looked at him indifferently. And then? What does this have to do with me? Baffling. Grover hesitated for a moment, then spilled it out. Although she has been rescued now, she refuses to eat, insisting on meeting Martin. Can you help out? Chapter 20. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Raising my hand, I waved it in front of Grover, showing off the diamond ring on my finger. Grover, do you think I would help with this? Martin has proposed to me now, we'll be getting married soon. Do you honestly think I would let a woman who has always coveted my husband meet him? Grover's gaze was fixed on the diamond ring. How? How is that possible? You agreed to him? I shrugged. Why not? Didn't you say you would always love me? Grover's eyes welled up. I was truly puzzled, not understanding what he was up to. He claimed to like Flora, yet here he was getting emotional with me. I sneered. Grover, not everyone will wait for you. What you don't cherish, someone else will. I advise you, if you truly like Flora, treat her well, take care of her, don't let her keep doing things that could ruin your relationship. Otherwise, you both will regret it. With that said, I turned and walked away. Grover called my name. I didn't even pause my steps. Not even for a moment. Chapter 21. I married Martin. We had a grand wedding. Family and friends came to witness our happiness. Martin said the more magnificent the wedding, the better. I invited many old friends and classmates, but notably did not invite Grover and Flora. However, they shamelessly showed up uninvited. They even attempted to cause a scene at my wedding. Flora even tried to spike the drinks. Luckily, some relatives nearby caught her in the act, and they were escorted out by security. Quite embarrassed. That was actually the last time I saw them. Later on, Martin's business grew bigger, and we opened branch offices. I switched jobs to help him manage, moving to a different city. The next news I heard about Grover and Flora was from old classmates. Grover dragged his feet, showing no intention of marrying Flora. Flora found a wealthy older man somewhere and wanted to elope with him. Grover found out. They broke up. Turns out, that wealthy older man was only after her looks, and once he got bored, he discarded her. I heard her ending was quite tragic. I just listened to it as a joke. After all, their matters were never my concern from the beginning.